Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Jennifer Arapo. I am a Solomon Island student, one of the Solomon Island students. I also take ED152 and which is human development. So for today's presentation, this is assignment 2, and this assignment 2 I will talk about perception, construct theories and philosophies of human development in socio-cultural context. As you can see in the above visual illustration, this is an illustration demonstrate human development. We grow from our birth right up to old age, and during those stages as we grow, we also encounter certain changes in our lives prior to the human development, the way we develop. So for this slide, I will explain our perceptions of human development begin at birth and continues to grow until we reach old age. We'll also explain some of the Western theories that contribute towards human development, towards our understanding of human development. And I will also talk about certain philosophical ideas and perception of what is human development nowadays. Prior for this presentation, I will elaborate more on the socio-cultural context of Solomon Islands, how we view human development. Moving on to the second slide of this presentation, I will now talk about some of the selected Western theories of human development. Okay, for this slide, for this presentation, I will only talk about 3 theories, and these theories are as follows: Piaget's theory of cognitive development, I will talk about that, and I will also talk about Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, and the third one that I will talk about is the attachment theory that was developed by Bowlby and Ainsworth. So for this second slide, I will now move on to Piaget's theory of cognitive development. I will discuss certain theories as I've already stated, but for this particular slide, that is the second slide, I will talk about Piaget's theory of cognitive development. To begin with, let's first look at Piaget's brief background. And he comes up with this theory in 1896 to 1980. That was when his cognitive theory of development came into existence. So Piaget was a Swiss psychologist who published his first book, or his first paper, when he was just 10 years old. He published his first paper, and when he was 23 years old, he published his he earned his doctorate in natural science and worked for several decades in trying to understand children's cognitive development. Okay, prior to Piaget's theory of cognitive development, his theory centered around the idea of thinking, that the child acquired knowledge actively through exploring the world around them. Piaget concluded that there are 4 stages in the cognitive development of a child. That means a child must have to conquer its stage in life before he moved on to the next stage. And those 4 stages of Piaget's cognitive development are sensory-motor states, and we have that range from birth to 2 years old. We also have the pre-operational stage, which range from 2 to 7 years old, and we also have the concrete operational stage, that's from 7 to 11 years old, and we finally have the formal operational stage, that is 11 till adulthood. Okay, I will briefly explain what happens during those 4 stages according to Piaget theory of cognitive development. Okay, for the first stage, during the sensory motor stage, Piaget described that at this stage A child now begins think by exploring the things around them. They explore things by using their four senses, that is seeing things, hearing, touching, and smelling. Those are the four senses children are used to explore things around them. Children at this age, a child or an infant at this age cannot figure out ways to respond to certain things. For example, throwing of objects. Those are the ways children use to respond to certain things as they grow in their infancy period. And then moving on, um, they can also develop the idea of object permanence. Object permanence allows a child to understand or to know that things still exist even though it is out of sight. For instance, a mother entering the room or leaving the room still exists even though the child can see it or can see her. And at the end of the sensory motor stage, a child can now develop what Piaget called as uh, deferred imitation. Deferred imitation, Piaget used here, refers to um, some of the actions uh, the child able to grasp, like um, the way we teach our child, like if we told the child to say hi in verbal action, like using his hand, um, the child will not actually copy that imitation at the same time, but we put it in his mind, and later on, few months after that the child will able to imitate those actions that he learned or she learned. And moving on to the second stage, which is the pre-operational stage, which age 2 to 7 years old. In the pre-operational stage, according to Piaget, children at this age can now develop basic numerical abilities. They can now count 1 to 10. They can now perform a simple um, calculation like addition and subtraction. They also understand that if we add something to a quantity, it will increase the number of that quantity, and if we subtract things out of that quantity, then it will also reduce the number that left. And children at this age can also imagine things. They have imaginary friends in their minds, and they also have the ability to communicate. Like they can use better speech communication. Children at this age, they also find it difficult or to differentiate, or they also find it hard to understand the conservation of matter. Like if you give if you put juice in two different glasses with the same volume, and if one of the glasses is taller and one of the glasses is shorter, but the same volume or the same amount of juice is in both glasses, children at this age, they prefer to take the glass that is taller because they thought that there is more juice in that specific taller glass, because they do not understand the concept of conservation of matter. Children at this age can also can find it difficult to distinguish or differentiate fantasy from real characters. For instance, they can see cartoon characters as real people, and they do not differentiate that the cartoons are just fantasy while real people are real people. So that's what happened to uh, children at the pre-operational stage. Moving on, we have the concrete operational stage, which is between age 11 down to 11, age 7, sorry, down to 11 years old. Okay, at the concrete operational stage, Piaget stated that Children at this age now have the ability to think abstractly with reasoning and fully understand the concentration of matter. For example, children at this age will not will will found no difference in those different two glasses, the taller glass and the shorter glass. If there is a juice in the taller glass and the child pours it out into the shorter glass, the child will know that there is no difference in the amount of juice in that particular glass, because he now understands the concept of conservation of matter. Children at this age can do reasoning and now able to solve problems of their own. Now moving on to the last stage, according to Pivot's theory of cognitive development, that is the formal operational states. A child at this age can now able to think about hypothetical questions or situations. They can able to test hypotheses, and they also know how to organize themselves with scientific reasoning, and they also have the ability to solve problems of their own without the help of the parent. And that is for the second slide. And now we move on to the third slide, which is the second theory of the second Western theories of human development that help us understand what is human development, and that is Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. Okay, in regards to Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, which was initiated in 1902 to 1994, Erik Erikson himself was a stage theorist, and he modifies the theory of Freud's controversial theory of psychosexual development to psychosocial development theory. But unlike Freud, Erikson's theory focused more on the resolution of different crises in order to become a successful, complete person. And Erikson comes up with 8 stages. And the first is trust versus mistrust, that is birth to 12 months old, and mainly during the infancy stage. We have autonomy versus shame and doubt, that is 1 to 3 years old, and that is early childhood ages. We also have initiative versus guilt, that is 3 to 6 years old, and we refer to that as preschool ages. And then we have industry versus inferiority, that is 6 to 12 years old. And we also have identity versus role confusion, that is 2 to 18 years old, within the adolescence period. We also have intimacy versus isolation, that is 20 years old through early 40s. And the second to the last, we have the generativity versus isolation, that is the seventh stage, but the 8th stage is generativity versus stagnation, that is 40s through mid 60s. And then the 8th stage is integrity versus despair, that is from mid 60s to end of life. Okay, moving on, I will now discuss what Erikson thought of in those 8 stages of psychosocial development. In the first stage, trust versus mistrust, that is the infancy stage. This stage centers around the infant's basic needs that is supposed to be met by the parent. Okay, and if those basic needs were met, then it leads to trust, and if those basic needs doesn't met adequately by the parents, then it also leads to what Erikson referred to as mistrust. Erikson stated that the first trust of a child is always the parents, the ones which are regarded as the closest to the child. And if the parents exposed warmth, for example, he exposes warmth behavior and somehow responds regularly to the need of the child and being more dependable and affectionate towards the child, then that will provide security for the child, and the child view of the world will be of trust. But if somehow the parents fail to provide such security or such secure environment to the child and fail to meet those basic needs of the child, then a sense of mistrust will also be acquired by the child as a result. Moving on to the second stage, which is in autonomy versus shame and doubt, that is 1 to 3 years old, and that is the preschool. We refer to them as the early childhood um, children. Children at this age, according to Erickson, began to explore their surrounding with constant learning about their environment. I we know of the early childhood children. We also refer to them as the play school, the playful years or the naughty years. Children at this age, they very sensitive to responses parents make to them, and they also begin to form a group of playmates, and they can so that they can play together. Okay, children at this age, they also encourage to um, develop a sense of autonomy or a sense of being able to handle many problems on their own. Like if they want to solve a particular drawing, they want to do that on their own until they solve it without the help of the parent or the caregiver. And it is the parent's responsibility to ensure that we encourage the children to achieve or to solve problems of their own. Because if the parents, we are too lenient with our kids, then um, it will also encourage autonomy for the child. But if we become too overprotective, then a child will also develop shame and doubt for not having the ability to handle their own problem. Moving on, we have the third stage, which is initiative versus guilt, and that was regarded as the preschool years. And children at this age can able to initiate planning and task for the sake of just being active and move on. And at this age, a child wants to begin and complete their own action for a purpose. Like a child has a specific aim, a specific purpose in which he wants to achieve in his behavior or in his action. And if the initiation plan does not achieve the then the desired achieve the desired result, the result they wanted in their life, then they will also be feel guilt or feel guilty for not completing that particular task, for not able to handle or to achieve what they desire, the result, the desired result. The fourth stage is industry versus inferiority, that is the school age. Children becomes well aware of themselves as individuals. They work hard to be responsible, they do good and do the right thing and more reasonable to share and cooperate with others. They being productive gives them the idea of industry, while failure to master trust, autonomy, and industrial skills may result into self-doubt, failure, and a sense of inferiority. The fifth stage is identity versus role confusion, that is the adolescent stage. At this stage, the child may become goal-oriented and knows better about oneself. At this stage, a child may begin to think about the roles they may play in the adulthood. Um, Children at the adolescent stage, they wanted so much to become adults. They want to pass the level of their adolescence, so they begin to do things that they can only do in the adulthood. They wanted so much to able to move on to the adulthood. But at this age, occupational identity is very much present at this age. Moving on to the sixth stage is known as intimacy versus isolation, that is adulthood. And at this stage, we are now fully independent but still wants to fit into the society. We're now ready to raise a child, but also sometimes isolate ourselves due to intimacy. We also have fear of being rejected, and sometimes our ego cannot bear the pain of rejection, which leads us to isolate ourselves from others. For instance, in the adulthood, um, we learn to um, we learn to have a relationship or friendship with other people. But if we think other people betrayed us and we felt betrayed, then also, that will also lead us to isolate ourselves from the rest of the group. And if we felt that we've been helpful one way or the other, and then that we will also feel that we overcome the intimacy and isolation stage. Moving on to the seventh stage, which is generativity versus stagnation, that is adulthood, and maybe 40 to through 60, early 60s. At this age of life, we now have the ability of being responsible to take care of ourselves, and we also have knowledge and accomplished um, our certain goals, goal-oriented, the goals and the long-term, short-term goals we have in our lives. We achieved at this age, and at this age, we also have the ability or the mindset to help other people or to raise a child. For instance, being volunteering is one of the caring attitude we have when we reach the seventh stage, which is adulthood from 40 to 60. And then we have the eighth stage, that is the last stage for Erickson's um, theory of psychosocial development, and that is integrity versus despair, that is maturity. At this stage, we explore life as a retired person. It was during this time we acknowledged our accomplishments and we able to develop our integrity, because we look back in our lives and we see that we have made an accomplishment. Our goals, we have reached our goals. Whatever we want in life, we already established it. So we develop a sense of integrity. But if somehow we look back and see ourselves as a failure or certain aspects of life we did not meet in our years of growing, then we also have the sense of um, we also have a sense of despair because we did not able to achieve our goals in life, and disappointment is one of the reasons why we become we develop this sense of despair in our lives. With that, that's the end of the theories of development for Erickson's theory of psychosocial development. Moving on to the fourth slide, we have the attachment theory. In this slide, we will look at the attachment theory. Attachment theory focus more on the dynamics of long-term relationship with humans. This theory was developed by John Bowlby in 1969 and Mary Ainsworth in 1970. But prior to this presentation, I will only talk about the four theories or the four stages of Bowlby attachment theory. And those theories, according to Bowlby, is as follows: pre-attachment from birth to 6 months, attachment in the making 6 weeks to 8 months, clear-cut attachment 8 months to 18 months, formation of reciprocal attachment, that is 18 months to 2 years old, and these stages were only in the infancy stage. For the first stage, at this stage, according to Bowlby, the infant starts to recognize the smell of the caregiver, the sound of her voice. The baby cannot create attachment to the caregiver by uh, the smell or by smiling and the feeling of comfort. And child, the child will also cry when they feel the need to be close to the caregiver. Child can still comfortable being left alone with an unfamiliar person. At this age, um, an infant doesn't recognize much of the caregiver. So even if the infant left alone with other people, that still be okay with the child. Moving on for the second attachment stage is attachment in the making. Attachment at this stage is getting closer, and infants can cry when in the arms of different person. An infant at this stage now began to know her mother, the person that is so close to her, and if she was in the arms of another person, um, then the child will also know. And the child will become more talkative with the mother than with the uncle or than with the sister of the mother. Child can still be more upset when the mother leaves. Parents continue to meet for the basic needs of the child at this age. Okay, moving on to the third stage, which is clear-cut attachment. This type of attachment basically surrounds the child's need for the Okay, for clear-cut attachment, this type of attachment basically surrounds the child's need for the caregiver, constant provision and attention. Failure to meet such desire of a child can lead to separation, anxiety in a child. The final stage of Bowlby attachment theory is formation of reciprocal attachment. A child at this age can form rapid understanding of language concepts, and children also understand that a parent can come and go. An example would be going and returning from work every day. A child will not know that the parent can come and go at any time. With that, it concludes the theories, the Western theories that contributes towards our understanding of human development. Now we move on to the fifth slide of this presentation, and this is my perception of how I view human development. Okay, I perceive human development as a change in which every living being in the human kingdom we encountered as we grow from birth to old age. We go through changes such as physical changes, psychological changes, emotional changes, social changes, cultural changes, and spiritual changes. Those are the type of changes we encountered as we grow from childhood to old age. Okay, I myself viewed a physical change as one of the contributing factors towards human development, and it is something to do with the changes of the human body, which related to biological changes, and that is the way we grow from one stage to another. We cannot be childhood always, and we cannot be an adolescence always. We grow from one stage to another, and in those changes, physical changes also happening to us due to the way we develop in the human development lifespan. And moving on, we also looked at psychological factors, which are also one of the contributing factors to human development. When I say psychological factor, I'm referring to the human being mindset, how we human being we viewed or we behave, um, our attitudes and our actions and our behaviors are a response to what our mind think or to what our mind thought. And the way we behave, either it is acceptable or not acceptable in the community, are all centered around the way we think, how we think and how we do things, and how we behave in a particular community or society. Social interaction with others in the society also of great help to the way we evolve from one stage to another. Social interaction helps us gain knowledge from others on how they view our human development. It helps us share ideas with others, our beliefs or the way we understand things, and then we can exchange our ideas and we learn to raise our kids in a way that is acceptable, or we learn to live in a community that is uh, like a respected person and people that we understand each other and we care for each other in that particular society. Emotional changes also help us to be strong at this age, at how we grow. We also learn to keep our emotions to ourselves so that whatever happens, we can control our emotions. Like if we if we have the kind of character to being so emotional when we were younger, as we grow older, we learn to adapt. We have a mindset of being strong. We are somebody, we can get through this, and that mindset help us to contain our emotions to ourselves without expressing it to others in the society. And moving on, our culture, the cultural context of the Solomon Island also help us grow as we move on from one stage to another in the human development. For instance, in our cultural setting, it helps shapes our understanding of what we should and we should not do in the community. For instance, in the education system, we train to be respectful, we train to be understanding, we train to be caring, and we train to show love to others. But in the Solomon Island context, those things we only acquired through our cultural system, because it was something that passed on from one generation to another. Our forefathers told our fathers to the ways of living in the society. We learn to help, we learn to care, and we learn to love, we learn to do things in a certain acceptable way, because that was how we were conditioned when we were a child. Our parents teach us our norms and our cultural behavior so that we can become somebody that respect others in a particular community or in a particular society. So our culture also nurture us to grow in the human development. As we evolve from one stage to another, our culture also help us achieve those of our needs. Moving on to my last perception of human development, that is spiritual, the type of belief system we adopt as time goes on. Our belief system also one of the influential factors that affects the human development in the Solomon Islands nowadays. For instance, in the past, we believe in certain gods, certain tribes we have our own gods, or certain islands we have our own gods prior to our cultural setting. But as Christianity introduced to the Solomon Islands in the 80s and the 90s, we now begin to adopt the changes brought by Christianity and as well of the culture combined together. Like respect is something taught to us from our forefathers, and in the Christian way, we also train to be caring, train to understand each other. We also train to have a mindset that is full of helping each other and caring for others' needs rather than caring for oneself. So, with that, that's how we Solomon Island view human development in our own ways. And now we move on to the seventh slide, which is the current perspective of the human development. Okay, the current trend in the human development basically um, depends on certain theories. But prior to this presentation, I will talk about the constructivity theory, which was implemented by Piaget, and this theory centered around education, students' education, and teachers' way of thinking, of teaching. This theory stated that learners construct their own knowledge rather than acquiring them in the classroom. Like learning theories, teaching theories, and education reform, those three things have been come under what we call as um, the constructivism theory that was implemented by Jim Piaget. Okay, for learning theories, we learn we learn through what we two components that we call accommodation and assimilation. Accommodation is reframing new experience that already present in our mental capacity. For instance, we meet somebody new, like a new friend, and then he is nice, just like the other friends that we have that are also nice. So we take the characters of that recent nice friend and we add it to the characters of our old friends, and that's what it means by our mental capacity. We compare those two things, and those things were the same, and then we acquire them. And then another thing is assimilation. Is individual have new ability to rethink what we once misunderstood and evaluate what is important to perceive. For instance, um, knowledge is something that we already know, and when we learn new ideas from others and we compare it to the ideas that we have behind our mind earlier on, and we know that what we have earlier is misunderstood, so we take that new idea and then we replace it with our misunderstanding, and that is what Piaget called assimilation. In Piaget's theory of constructivism, he stated that learners already have the ability in them to source and create their own knowledge based on the experiences they have in the past. Piaget constructivism theory relate to us the process of assimilation or taking in new experiences and putting them into the existing schemas. And accommodation, as I've already stated earlier on, is the making use of the new information we gathered to revise our existing schemas. Nowadays, students grasp knowledge fast by learning rather than receiving information. For instance, doing solving the mathematical problem of for instance, I take myself as an example. Doing solving the mathematical problem of my own is better than listening to all the recorded audios or listening to the teachers whole day. The more examples we have or the more activities we did in class, that's more important than listening to the teacher for the whole period of time or for the whole period of the lecture. So that thus it is of great importance for the teacher to create a work plan that helps every learner to be part of the learning process. In order for the learner to become more to understand more of the concept the teacher present, it is the teacher's responsibility to plan the work plan so that every learners would come together and form a group and do discussion that will help them to understand that specific or that particular subject. Now we move on to the seventh slide of this presentation, which is the conclusion statement. The seventh slide summarizes the content of this presentation. We first look at theories that help us understand the concept of life from birth to old age, and those theories all centered around how we think and how we behave in a particular society as we evolve, as we develop. And we also learned about how the philosophers viewed the history of human development, like those of Piaget, and they viewed human development in different ways. They come up with different ideas, different stages, but those stages are similar and have some similarities and also have some differences in it. And in regards to Solomon Island sociocultural context, we also viewed human development as a change in which every human being adapts, and those changes we applied in our lives as we grow from one stage to another. With that, it concludes this seventh slide. The eighth slide is just references that taken to support this presentation. So with that, it concludes my presentation for this morning. Thank you very much for listening. If any of you guys have any question to ask, then you can do so. Or if not, then I'll give, let's say, a few seconds or a minute. Looks like there's no questions, so thank you very much guys for your time, and thank you.